Right, I'm going to be as hungry as anybody else in this room, if not hungrier, so I'll get through this as fast as I can. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you about a collaborative asset management project we embarked on in Dorset in conjunction with WJ Road Markings and Causeway Technologies. In regard to our road marking asset. So before I get into that, I just wanted to demonstrate that sort of that golden thread that someone talked about earlier. So this is all about sort of tying in our corporate priorities and demonstrating through our highway service plan about you know, how we actually deliver on that and support those. So for us in highways, it's all about keeping our road users safe, reducing the risk of collisions and the number of people killed or seriously injured on our roads. But notice this year, one of the big sort of priorities that came in was all about climate change and all about sort of reducing our carbon footprint. So it was another sort of key factor for us to consider. So we have 3,800 kilometres of road network in Dorset, which is predominantly rural, unlit environments. We recognise that our road markers are a very safety critical asset, so it's very important that we manage these properly. We know that in the event of serious collisions, it's one of the things that police look at, and I've on more than one occasion had to provide reports in relation to not just road condition, but road markings as well. And I think we're long past the days of sending Corin and Dave out looking at roads and saying, yeah, the lines look all right. So I think everything we're doing in Dorset is very much kind of like data sort of supported. So as an asset manager, I've got a very, very small team in Dorset. We keep it very, very simple. It's all about what assets we have and where they are. It's all about what we know about those assets as well. And one of those key things is about the condition it's in. We also need good systems to be able to analyze all that data and produce those kind of reports with those investment scenarios and producing those programs of work. But equally, we need to understand what we're comfortable with in terms of like service levels and interventions and things like that. So every 2 years, we review our highways asset management plan, and it's always a very honest appraisal, even if that is kind of documenting knowledge gaps or poor performance. But some of our best developments have really come from those action plans where we've documented how we're actually going to address this. And this is a really good example, something I'm not very proud of at all, but we were quite shocked in 2021 when we did our retro reflectivity survey to find that 44% of our A-road markings were 85 millicandelas or less. And in fact, very little of our road marking condition was in good sort of state. We did sort of start to wonder about that, but then when we started looking at other data sets that we had to support it, so the radar surveys that we do gives us visibility or sort of wear indexes on our road markings, and they really reinforce that sort of picture that our road marking asset was in quite poor state. So we really sort of thought, you know, how are we actually going to deal with this? And I thought, you know, can we blame COVID? And I think it really actually, I have to put my hand up and say we took our eye off the ball. And the only sort of comfort was that our sort of road studs were still performing well. So the first thing we did, we spoke to Causeway Technologies because we were aware that we had this data set in terms of wear, and we said, could we start to build something that would sort of take out all that worst category with some costs that I can take to my members to say as a one-off, we can eradicate all that poor performance. And it was pretty much double what we were actually investing at the time, but that was sanctioned and we changed that spend profile for that particular year. At that time, I started to engage with WJ Road Markings as well, and our ex-director, I was chatting to Andrew, and he told me that WJ were actually looking to engage with the local authority to start developing like a new strategy or maintenance strategy of the road marking asset. So I said, well, you know, we're already kind of working on something like this with Causeway, so let's pull us all together because there's lots of expertise within our three areas. So let's pull it all together and try and sort of have like a little project team to progress this. So we did this, and to start with, we had to produce the scope of what we were actually looking at. So we wanted to develop like a life cycle planning model, which was based primarily on the retro reflectivity survey of the line markings. We wanted to factor in lots of different information about the actual lining products as well, and things like sort of performance and lifespans. And WJ actually brought in their product specialists to help advise on that, which was really invaluable. As I said earlier, I think as a client, I want to be comfortable about what we're actually defining in terms of our interventions, and WJ were very good in supporting that and talking about what other people were doing and what they recommended. So we had some really expert advice on that too. We obviously had lots of other data sets, like I say, the road AI stuff we brought in as well, because whilst primarily we were looking at rural unlit sites, we also wanted to factor in any sort of urban sites where it was like the worst sort of category. So we didn't want to lose sight of those. We wanted to look at different budget scenarios as well. So not just what it would take to sort of like eradicate all the worst sort of category, but look at our actual budget and what we could actually deliver with that. So ultimately, we wanted to produce a program of work that we could get out on the network and very promptly deal with this problem. But equally, we wanted to remove sites that we already had sort of planned, or we had planned for resurfacing or surface treatment. So we were able to load in like our forward program and knock all those sites out. So we wanted to look at some of WJ's premium products as well. So some of their like Weatherline Plus products, understand about their life and how they perform. And obviously, what we also recognized was that we had collision data we could import as well, because that would help us have really targeted program of maintenance if we were in a scenario where members weren't supporting increased investment, and we could then do some really targeted improvements. So we had some difficulties initially, and really I think WJ probably didn't understand how we sort of like this data, we do this analysis, but I ultimately, every year I'd get a memory stick with a load of PDF reports on it and a spreadsheet with lots of numbers. And I just didn't have the ability to actually do that proper analysis. I would scan through the PDF documents, and I think in some way that was probably to blame in some ways for not really properly doing that analysis and understanding where that sort of maintenance needed to be targeted on the network. I think there were some initial issues with the actual retroreflectivity survey data and actually importing that into Horizons, our asset management software. So I know both those parties, Causeway and WJ, did a lot of work in changing that format and getting that into the system. So once all that data was in the system, it was over to Causeway and doing that analysis. And in that system, they built their deterioration models, looked at different investment scenarios, maintenance options, and ultimately, produce a forward works plan for us. And that was priced as well. So the actual investment we needed to make, it was more than what we're currently investing. So I took that to our members and presented that information to them, and that they actually agreed to additional corporate capital funding to support that over a 5-year period. So we were actually able to invest properly in this particular asset group. The next sort of exercise really was to validate the schemes that were coming out of this, and a couple of sites I've picked up, there was a bit of interest in at the time as well, so it was good to have a look at these. We did this entirely at desktop because we had our Vaisala Road AI data, so we were able to very quickly go through the sites and have a look at what they looked like, and yeah, we were all in agreement. They were really, really good sites. It also gave us the opportunity to have a look at the Weatherline Plus products. So this is the A37. It's a very fast section of road, issues with mist and fog. So we wanted to use one of these premium grade products. So the Weatherline's the one with the little bubbles and the crystals on it. And it appeared to make quite a difference, as you can see in that picture. I think some of the real benefits are at night. So this was me coming back from Bristol Airport with my wife. We do this a lot, go and look at new sections of road or new things, and this was one occasion where she was actually quite impressed. So, but we did get a lot of positive feedback from colleagues, from the police, and a national road safety group. So we knew that this was something that we do need to look at in the future. So going back to the climate and ecological emergency, like most of authorities now, we've declared an emergency and a supporting strategy. I think a lot of the initiatives initially are all around sort of low energy asphalts and sort of biomix trials and all those kinds of things, but I think we haven't got to forget some of the smaller asset groups, and we can start to think about what sort of savings we can make from those. So one of my colleagues, Ben at Causeway has produced some sort of charts for me which demonstrate sort of like some of these thermoplastics and how they compare to some of these more resin sort of type products. And we're just getting into that because now we've dealt with some of the immediate issues, we want to start getting into developing that sort of more longer term strategy and using some of these other premium grade products. So this is kind of just some charts Ben's sort of done, I think, that sort of demonstrate the same thing. But for us as an authority, I think this project, we've helped develop a sort of risk-based approach to management of our line marking asset. It conforms to that sort of code of practice guidance. It ticks all the boxes for self-assessment as well, which obviously is incentivized, so it means we get 100% funding. I think the investment required, we can like taking that to our members and securing additional funding is really invaluable as well, and they really appreciate us being able to give that information to them. And all the things around defining an approach and carbon reduction. But for me, I think the key is actually by engaging those product specialists, it's improved my learning. I've been in highways for about 23, 24 years. I never really got into the world of road marking, so I didn't really have a great understanding about how long they would last. And I think by understanding some of those issues, it helped me understand where we got where we did initially. So that was really invaluable. I think for WJ, they're now able to use this model to offer to their other clients as kind of like a managed service, which is great news for them and any of their clients. And the same for Causeway Technologies. Anybody who's got horizons can look at that model and use that within that system. So I think, and it's really just been a big win for keeping people safe out on our network in Dorset. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mike. That was a really good sort of case study of how all of our assets matter, and it's certainly something that I'll take back. And interesting to know that you're using technology there. You mentioned the Visala Road AI, and there's lots of other products out there that can help councils to find out how their assets are doing. I know we're running slightly over time, but if anybody has got a question they'd like to ask Mike, if you could just indicate and we can just take one question. If you see a hand and I miss it, let me know. Okay. Can I just ask you a question myself? How much are you rolling out what you've learned from this across your network?
I think as a service, there's a lot of things that we've talked about recently where we can demonstrate, I think, that a lot of the home working and we've lost some of that collaboration even within our own service. And we've had conversations, with service managers and colleagues to say we've got to sort of pull this apart a little bit and get back together because that collaboration has been lost a little bit. So, this project was a really good example of how bringing those three parties together. It might not be as structured as Lincolnshire's really good work that they've done, but I think some of the values were still there from Frank's presentation around sort of trust and all of those other values. So when I saw that list, I thought, well, some real value out of this project. So.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mike. So if people just want to indicate, thank you again.